there is a famine. God has placed you in a house. It is a house of bread. It is a house where you were supposed to be praising God. But in the midst of that, you were challenged with a famine. In the midst of that, you are a man, and the burden rests on your shoulders. That you would somehow lead your family to a land, to a place where they can eat, where they can survive. And you are, in the midst of all of that, supposed to keep your loyalty and your faith to Yahweh, the only God that they have ever known. But yet and still, God is commanding that you would be faithful to Him, but yet you can't feed your family. Now, that is a textual paradox. God is saying, be faithful, and you can't feed your family. It is similar to COVID-19. You have to lead your family through this virus, and yet God is saying, be faithful. When you have lost your job, God is saying, you are living in a house that I demand praise. And in your spirit, you really have nothing to praise God for. Because your family lacks water. And your family lacks bread. I'm just trying I'm trying to wake you up and to invite you to see the textual tension in this text. God is asking that you would praise Him. And you feel like you don't have anything to praise Him about. So when you get to the book of Ruth, chapter 1 and verse 1, now it came to pass in the days when judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, was in that land. And the text says that he took his family and he sojourned into a country called Moab. It says he and his wife and his 2 sons. And verse 2 says, and the name of the man was Elimelech. Somebody ought to wake up and help me here. The name of his wife was Naaman. The name of his 2 sons was Mahalan and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came to the country of Moab, and verse 2 ends by simply saying, and they continued in a place called there. They stayed there. They continued there. And you can see, before you ever get to the story of Naaman and Ruth, you really have a story in verse 1 and 2 about the failure of masculine leadership. I know that this song will not go off well. Y'all are acting awful special in church. But you see in verse 1 and in verse 2 what a family looks like when masculine leadership collapses and moves on your flesh. You see a man panics and he leads his family outside of. And it looks like I got to preach to myself. You see this man panics, and instead of staying put, and it was hard for him to stay put, because when there was a biblical famine, they would fight over pigeon droppings. Women were threatened to cannibalize their own children, so they weren't just hungry, it was a shown of famine. You can see that in verse 1, that it was a famine shown up. And in the midst of this famine, Elimelech, which his name means in the Hebrew, it means king. But he wasn't acting kingly. in this text.
Yeah.
And men have to reach the point that even when you struggle, you cannot move. Even when you don't know what to do, you cannot panic, you cannot move. You cannot exit the place wherein God has never told you to leave. You never read in verse 1 or verse 2 where the Spirit of the Lord came on Elimelech and told him to leave the house of prayer. Somebody, come on now. You got to help me here. You never read in verse 1 or 2 where he was led by the unction of the Holy Spirit to leave Bethlehem, Judah, and go into the land of Moab. And I want to help these brothers by encouraging you sisters and telling you sisters that it's hard to be a man. It's hard to always make the right choices. Somebody help me here. It's hard to get it right every time. And this brother panicked under pressure. I want to ask these brethren, have you ever panicked under the pressure of you trying to make sure that your wife ate and ate good, that your children survived and survived well? Have you ever panicked? Have you ever panicked under that kind of pressure? And if you have ever panicked under that kind of pressure, you in good company with this fella named Elimelech, because he leaves the house of praise. And verse 1 says that he sojourns into the land of Moab. Now, let me just give you the Hebrew definition for the land of Moab. It literally means in the English garbage can. Therefore, you have this brother who leaves the house of praise. And he leads his family into the garbage can because he hears that there were some scraps of bread in a garbage can. And can I just encourage the brethren by telling you, wherever you take your family, somebody ought to help me.
Yes, sir.
Don't take them to a garbage can. You have to struggle to wait on God. You struggle and stay put, and you wait on God. But by all means, you don't never want to leave your family to the garbage can. You see Elimelech in tow with his family behind him, headed for the garbage can. It is he. And there's his wife, Nene, behind him. And on each side of her was Mahalalel and Chilion. And they leave the place that God has placed them. And yonder they go to the garbage can. And the text says, and when they get to the garbage can, it's a short story. You know, the story actually shifts at verse number 3. You can see the shifting in the story at verse number 3. They are all happy, or they think that they are in this garbage can. But then something happens in verse number 3. And I wanted to simply come and tell you, don't go to Moab. There is some scraps there, but it's too expensive. It will cost you too much to move your family, to move your husband, to move your wife, your children, your loved ones from where God has placed you into a garbage can. And you don't have to get far in this story. You can just get to verse 3 and something happens in verse 3. The scripture says that Elimelech dies. Now she's husbandless. The family of 4 has now been deduced. Somebody help me to a family of just 3. It is now Nene and her 2 sons, Mahalalel. Somebody ought to help me here. And Chileon. Because they moved from the house of bread, the house of praise, into the garbage can. They in bad shape. And then the story even gets worse. When you get to verse 4, the sons are now free to break God's law, and they take unto themselves wives from the country of Moab. They take unto them 2 wives from a country that God never told them to go. They take unto themselves 2 wives from a group of people that God had restricted them from mingling with. And now they have 2 wives. And notice in this text that the sons were not free to get into this mischief until after the old man died. It is all our responsibility. It is a man's responsibility to keep his household in order. And what your sons would get away with their mother. Come on, y'all, wake up. They know that they can't get away with it with their father. Because there are 2 different authorities that come from the feminine versus the masculine. Notice that they had to wait. Y'all got to help me here. They had to wait until Daddy died in verse 3. And as soon as Daddy died, the next verse, in verse 4, they take unto themselves wives as if Nene didn't have that much influence over her own sons. They knew they could get away with it with her, but they knew they better not have tried it with their father. But as soon as their father is gone, they take on to themselves some wives. Now you have Oprah, and now you have Ruth on this scene. And now her family has just increased by 2. Somebody say increase. Why don't y'all help me here? Somebody say increase. You have a subtraction in verse 3. But now in verse 4, you have 2 more inductees in this family. So now you have Nene, you have Mahalalel, you have Chileon, you have Ruth, and you have Oprah. And now this family who was deduced to 3, now you have a family who have now increased to 5. But now you got to keep on reading because it happens so fast. You got to go right down to verse 5, and verse 5 says another deduction takes place. Somebody wake up and help me preach this. Because in verse 5, you have a couple of more funerals to attend. A couple of more caskets are being rolled out in verse 5. Mahalalel died. Somebody ought to help me here. Whenever you do not follow the instructions of God, Moab will cost you the fatality of your family. That's why your choices are important. That's why what you say is important. That's why decisions that masculine make is important, because your family depends on it. And now you have Mahalalel dies. You have Chileon dies. And now another deduction has taken place. Notice now the scripture says in verse 5, notice it says she was left alone. Her 2 daughter-in-laws are not even considered, but she's now left alone. Somebody say alone. She's now left alone and by herself. I want to show you. Do y'all have time? I'm going to be finished here because y'all don't even act like you want to have church. So I'm going to cut this thing off. But do you have time? I want to show you textual distance between verse 5 and verse number 6. It's in there. Notice now in verse number 5, it talks about the death of Mahalalel and Chilion, and it says that Nene was left there alone by herself. But then the first words that you read in verse 6 is she did what? She arose. Every woman, you need to let me arrest your attention right here. In verse 5, she's wiped out. In verse 5, she's so wiped out that the narrator don't even call her Nene. They just name her that woman. They don't even call her Nene. They just say, hey, that woman. Because a woman who didn't have a husband, a woman who didn't have sons to carry on her husband's name, you would be deduced from Nene to just that woman. Reverend. Moab is devastating. Moab is devastating. So now you have that woman. She is wiped out. She has no one left but herself. But watch this. The joy for every woman in this house is the beginning of verse 6. Then she arose. After Elimelech died, she arose. After Mahalalel died, she arose. After Chilion died, she arose. She had no other choice but to follow her husband. If she was going to be a good wife, she was doing the right thing. She could have known that he was making the bad decision. But because she was a good woman of God, because she was a virtuous woman, she said, honey, whatever you say. But let me tell you this. When God takes Elimelech, when he takes Mahalalel, when he takes Chilion, now it gives birth to her having a new opportunity. Now she can make decisions. Somebody help me. For herself. Mother, she can make decisions for herself because husband and two sons, all of the masculinity have been stripped from this family. And now she has to think for herself. She has to fend for herself. She has to make decisions that she's never made for herself. And sometimes, as harsh and as cruel as this may sound, sometimes God has to call folk home in order for you to blossom, in order for you to balloon. Sometimes God has to allow certain folk to fall asleep so that you can give birth to new opportunities, to new decisions, to new purposes, to new perspectives. And so she has new opportunity beginning at verse 6. And at verse 6, she is now able to make decisions and choices for herself. And she gets up. She dries her tears. She gets up. The scripture says she arose. She mends her own broken heart. She gets up. And some of you women, because Day left you, because Pookie left you, you can cry. Nobody wants to come to that pity party. Get up. You can make it. Get up. You can survive. I know that you can't touch the person next to you, but just look at somebody and shake your finger at them and tell them, get up. It's time for you to get up. Make your own choices. Get up. Do better for yourself. Get up. Don't depend on welfare. Get up. Don't depend on subsidized housing. get up. You got 2 babies, no baby daddy, no husband. Feel sorry for yourself if you want to, but when you look at verse 6, you do have a choice. You can get up. He left you, so what? Get up. She left you, so what? Get up. She's trying to take everything that you work for, give it to her, and then get back up. You were fighting over big screen TVs and houses and who's going to get the car. Give that person all of that stuff. Work on your get up plan. Get up. Sit down a minute. I want to preach about 5 more minutes here. She got up. Was it nothing holding her back? You need to go. Mother, take this back to the women of your church and tell them get up. Go tell South Central Los Angeles and tell them to get up. Don't wait for Trump to pick them up. Get up. She got up. She sends her daughter-in-law's home. And you know that that passage gives birth to that famous statement. Oprah said, okay, I'm going back home. Ain't nothing left here for me. I'm going home. And she tried to pull that stuff with the Ruth. And Ruth said, no. Where you go? I go. Somebody said it. Where you lodge, I lodge. What you know? Your God shall be. Went from polytheistic to monotheistic. Went from several gods to one God. She said, where you die. She said, I'm going to die. Can I just pause here? Can I rebuke the church for a minute? Can I rebuke them? That's the ministry of older women in the church. Women, you are not doing nothing in church until you have a roof. Got to have a roof. Titus 2 talks about the job of older women in church is not to cook. Can I say that? You won't get up and say it to me, right? Your job isn't the kitchen. Your job is roof. The problem is when Nene don't find roof, Pookie finds roof. When Nene is under a big hat in church, when Nene is doing church work, Pookie has got roof. Your job is not to have 100 women in white. Your ministry is roof. Straightening out Ruth. Giving Ruth hope. And the reason why Ruth was so attached to Nene is because Nene invested in her. And you cannot confuse church work with Ruth. Your first ministry is Ruth. Is that child right there? That's your ministry. Those children right there. Did I offend you? Your ministry is Ruth. You got to learn how to speak Ruth. You got to learn who Cardi B is. You got to learn who Nicki Minaj is. Because that's the language of Ruth.
That's right.
Ruth said, I'm sticking with you. You sticks with Pookie.
Yeah.
That's just in her. You can't call a young woman foolish because she loves Pookie so much. She will sit in the car while he do a drive-by.
Oh my God, Reverend.
That commitment is in her. It's not in her for Pookie. It's in her for Nene. But Nene is absent. So she gives it to Pookie. Where Nene is absent, Pookie is present. That's why your daughters are attracted to Pookie, because they get ignored in the church.
Oh my God. Reverend.
You have to do something more with them than teach them how to cook in the kitchen. They have a vacuum, a void, and a vacancy. And as soon as Ruth's heart was broke, who did she run to? She ran to Naaman. You have to deal with broken-hearted girls, because when their hearts are broke, they become vulnerable for anything. Y'all are mad at me? Y'all mad? Guess what? I wouldn't care no way. Look at the text. When you go to Moab, verse 3 and 5 tells you will experience the fatality of your family. But go to verse 19. When she comes home,
Reverend.
when you go to the Moab, watch this. It's going to show up on your facial features. It will be the fatality of your family. And verse 19 says it's going to show up on your facial features. When she came in that house, when she came back to the gate of that city, guess what the folks said? The folks said, hold on. Nene, is that you? Moab will disfigure your face. You can't smoke weed and smoke dope and sleep with this man and that man and run wild, and it don't show up on your face. It will disfigure. Have you ever seen a young man, 30 or 40, made a career out of drugs, and he looked like he's 60? And on women, it does her worse.
That's it.
Because you were never meant for Moab. You were meant for Bethlehem. Shoot. Those women say, now, oh my God, that looks like a Nene. She walk like a Nene. And someone said, girl, no, that can't be Nene. Because Nene look a whole lot better, but we good at that. But when you go to Moab, it's going to tell on your face. You are going to age. An older woman who looks good, you can almost trace it back. She's well taken care of.
That's it.
But when she's had to hustle, when she's had to struggle, it shows up on her face. When you move down to verse number 21, it's going to pillage your purse. It's going to pillage your purse. You can't. Somebody ought to help me here. Feel like, oh Lord have mercy. You cannot afford Moab. It is going to affect your finances. She says, when she gets to open up her mouth, she says, I left out of here full. She said, but I'm coming back empty. One reason why you shouldn't smoke, though, you can't afford it.
My God.
One reason why you shouldn't excessively spend in department stores, you can't afford it. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. When are we going to come back to the Lord? It will affect your finances. It will pillage your purse. It will puncture your pulchritude. It's going to puncture your pulchritude. It's going to show up on your face. It's going to pillage your purse. You just can't keep money for nothing. Why? Because you're in the wrong place. Can I tell you, go back home. Go back home, point to somebody and tell them it's time to go home. Come on, turn around and point to somebody and tell them it's time to go home. Look at somebody and say, where are you going? Now you turn around and tell them I'm going home.
Yeah.
Why am I going home? Because I'm looking for the field of Boaz. You don't belong in anybody's field. You do belong in Boaz's field. You don't have to look good. You don't have to have surgery. You don't have to fix yourself up. Just be willing to work. And Boaz is on his way. Somebody help me here. Turn to somebody and tell them Boaz is on his way. You just be faithful. You don't have to sleep around. You don't have to sell yourself. Sure, just do the work in the field. Honor yourself. Glean in that field. Boaz is on the way. He ain't far from you now. He's on the way. Your kinship redeemer is on the way. The man that wants you for life and not for one night is on the way. You just glean his field. Glean his field. Why don't somebody lift up your hands and tell God, I'm gleaning. Put me in the gleaning business. Lead me to the right field. Show me where Boaz is. If you be faithful to glean the field, Boaz is going to show up. That's enough.